Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining our training, planetGOLD training on cross-programmatic indicators. As usual, this meeting is being recorded and will be placed on home base and the PowerPoint presentation as well. We have interpretation. As you can see, as usual, if you go to the globe at the bottom of the screen, you can choose your channel. Welcome to the participants. I think we can go to the next slide, please. So again, this PowerPoint and recording will be circulated following the session, and all relevant materials will be placed on home base. Remember, you have to put the home base link into your browser because you won't be able to find it just using Google. And questions can be written into the chat box during the presentation, and the team will address as we are able, but we will also pause frequently during the training so that you can ask questions in the chat box, and we'll actually have a dedicated time for questions if you have any. Okay, next slide, please. So today's speaker, I will be giving this training with our colleague, Malgorzata Stilo from UNEP. You can see her on the screen as well, and we'll be sharing, presenting different elements of this training. Next slide, please. So I will turn over the first part of this training to Gosha to just give a recap of reporting requirements for the planetGOLD Global Project. So Gosha, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Susan, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody who is joining us today. So as Susan said, before jumping into the indicators, I would like to remind us about the reporting requirement. Next one, please. Under the program, we have two cycles of reporting. One is quarterly online reporting. This happens at the end of every quarter. So let's say now we are in, actually we just recently finished Q1, which was from January to March, and we expect to have quarterly reporting provided by each project by the end of the next month, which is now at the end of April. So each project submits the key summaries of the activities undertaken in the past quarter. And using this data, we are producing cumulative summaries of key activities across all the projects and as well global project. We have also a second cycle, which is on annual basis, and it's annual progress report that each country project as well submits, and it covers a fiscal year, which is from July 1st of one year to June 30th of another year. And this reports includes narrative also reporting on the main activities and achievements under this reporting period. And it has a second element, which is quantitative and cumulative reporting on program level indicators. And this is what we are going to discuss today in a little bit more detail. But before going to our cross-programmatic indicators, next slide, please. I wanted also to recall again the system where we are providing the reporting every quarter and for annual reporting as well. It's called Integrated Global Online Data Reporting System, iGOLD. And we had a deep dive into how to navigate the system last month in March. So if you have missed that, the recording, as Susan mentioned, is available under planetgold.org homepage. And through this system, every project, again, you should have the login, but if you don't have, please don't hesitate to also reach out to me, or if you have trouble accessing your account, we'll be happy to assist you. So every project, project coordinator, and implementing agency that you are working with should have access to this online reporting system where you are able to add quarterly reports and an annual one. And we used the information that you provide in that reporting to produce a program-wide progress report that has been just recently launched for the previous period, if you have missed as well. Okay, I think next one, I think that's, sorry, before this is just also overview. What we are going to talk now in this in-depth training, we're again talking about cross-programmatic indicators, and we have 4 pillars under our program, which correspond to the 4 categories of indicators. One talks about mercury, and we are going to learn, how to calculate and estimate amount of mercury reduced, eliminated, mercury prevented, and mercury avoided, and what are the differences between those. In terms of formalization, to measure progress towards that, the program has a number of indicators, and we're going to also explain that. In terms of responsible gold, that is produced through the intervention under the program. There are also various indicators, including amount of responsible gold produced and amount of sold responsible gold to the formal markets. And in terms of the last indicator and pillar, which is access to finance, we are also going to introduce several of the indicators looking at the amount of funds made available, numbers of receiving funds to miners and operations, etc. Okay, this is just an overview. Now I'm going to jump into each of these 4 categories. So I'm going to give the floor back to Susan to take us through the first indicator.
Great. Thanks very much, Gosha. I appreciate it. I just want to give a quick reminder to everyone that everything we're about to talk about is covered in a guidance document on the calculation of cross-programmatic indicators. And again, the guidance document is available in English, French, and Spanish, and guess where? It's on home base, like everything. So you can find it there. And I think Asiate will be placing the links to the guidance document in the chat just to remind you all where they are. Okay, so first we're going to start with mercury abatement. That's the most maybe difficult one to talk about. So we'll start there. Next slide, please. So just a quick reminder of, our thinking about how to characterize mercury abatement. We first have to start with a recollection of how mercury is used in ASGM. So mercury is first applied either directly to all the ore or to a concentrate of gold ore. Very frequently after it is applied, the amalgam is squeezed to recover some of the mercury. So not 100% of the mercury applied actually sticks to the gold. Some of it is recovered and recycled for later use. The amalgam is produced, then it's burned. If there's a retort, again, some of the mercury may be recovered if there's a use of a retort or other mercury capture system. And then finally, there's the gold that is produced. That's a really small bit of gold there in that picture. Okay, so given that, next slide, please. When we talk about mercury use, the term mercury use, what we're talking about then is the amount that's applied during the processing, but subtracting out the amount that has been recovered for reuse after the application, and also subtracting out the amount that's recovered from mercury capture systems, such as retorts or other types of systems. So mercury use is the equivalent of mercury lost. Yeah, so and with that concept in mind, we can then estimate mercury use. A very typical way is to estimate it using the mercury gold ratio. if you can, yeah. So the mercury gold ratio, I'm sure probably most of you already know this, but just as a review, we use the mercury lost per unit of gold produced, and that is the mercury gold ratio. If you then multiply by the amount of gold produced, you get the amount of mercury lost for a given operation. That is a very typical way that mercury use is, in other words, mercury lost is calculated in national action plans, in plans for planetGOLD, target setting, etc. This is the normal method for calculating mercury use and mercury loss. Okay, next slide. So how do you estimate the mercury to gold ratio? Well, the best way to do it is go to the field and measure it. And just using the process that we described before, measure the amount that is applied to the ore, and then measure it after the squeezing has taken place and after the burning has taken place to see what the loss is. So the best way is to go to the field and get actual measurements at mercury using sites. But very frequently that's not possible for a number of reasons. And if you're not able to do physical measurements, then there's a lot of other sources of information. So for example, you can go to National Action Plan inventories, global mercury assessment, peer-reviewed articles, and other projects. There's a lot of data out there on the typical mercury to gold ratios that exist for different kinds of ASGM operations. You should use that data. You can use that data, but you need to make sure you cross-check those parameters for your specific site. So in other words, if you find a mercury to gold ratio in the literature, you should check, well, what type of mining is that ratio applied to? What were the ore characteristics? What kind of processing flow did they have at that site? And does that match the circumstances in my country? So, for example, you would not want to apply a mercury gold ratio for whole ore amalgamation if your site is using concentrate amalgamation. So you just need to match the data to your circumstances. If really no data are available, you really don't know, you haven't been able to go to the field, you really just don't have any information at all. Some people use as a first estimate general global theoretical values. And for concentrate amalgamation, the mercury gold ratio is about 1.3, and for whole ore amalgamation, it's between 3 and 5. Okay, so next slide, please. The next piece of information that you need is the amount of gold produced. And that's also frequently a difficult number to come by because miners are very secretive about the gold that they produce. But there's lots of different sources of information that you can use to triangulate an estimate of the amount of gold produced. And so some rough estimates can come from official trade data, although we know those are not very reliable, especially given the transport of gold across borders. Stakeholder interviews, gold trader interviews, you can get some idea of the amount of that's typically produced. You can also look at information from the field that's an indirect estimate, such as how much ore is being extracted, how much production on a daily basis and then extrapolate to annual basis. You could also get an estimate of how much money the miners are earning and then back calculate that based on the price of gold. So there's lots of different ways to come at a gold production estimate if you don't have reliable data from the field. I just want to point out this guidance document that is linked here in this slide. This guidance document provides extensive information, explanations, and sample calculations on how to estimate mercury use in small-scale gold mining. And it includes everything I just talked about regarding the mercury to gold ratio and gold production estimates with sample calculations. So that is a very important guidance document. Again, we have it on the planetGOLD website, and you also have it linked here, and you'll have this PowerPoint if you need to link back to it. Next slide, please. Okay, so given that background of how to do the basic calculation of mercury use, when we're talking about a planetGOLD intervention, different projects intervene in different ways. Generally speaking, planetGOLD strives to have mercury-free production. But sometimes there are steps along the way where some projects initially aim for less mercury to be used. So just mercury reduction prior to getting all the way to mercury elimination. So there are different calculations depending on the kind of intervention you are executing in your project. If you are, as an initial step, trying to encourage miners to use less mercury, then what you will calculate is the amount of mercury reduced from your interventions. So mercury reduced is defined as the change in the amount of mercury lost to the environment as a result of introducing processes that reduce mercury lost per unit of gold production. So an example would be if you show miners how to convert from using whole ore amalgamation to concentrate amalgamation. So instead of applying mercury to the entire ore or to the sluice box or to the pit, instead they only apply mercury to the concentrate. That really reduces mercury use substantially. Or introduction of retorts. If you have retorts that capture some of the mercury during the burn, that also reduces the amount of mercury lost to the environment. Okay, next slide. So the calculation, how do you calculate that? Mercury reduced, you first calculate the amount of gold produced prior to the intervention times the old mercury to gold ratio before the project's intervention. So, for example, if you have a site that's using whole ore amalgamation, you would calculate the amount of gold produced times a mercury to gold ratio relevant to whole ore amalgamation. Then, if you intervene and go to concentrate amalgamation, you would compare the amount of gold produced after your intervention, which hopefully is actually higher, and then the new mercury to gold ratio after your intervention. For example, if you introduce concentrate amalgamation, the mercury to gold ratio will be lower. You'll use less mercury. So you take the difference between the prior and the post scenario to estimate the mercury reduced. Pretty simple calculation. Next slide, please. Okay, even simpler is if you are in fact going right for mercury elimination. So for example, if you are helping miners convert from using mercury to using a gravity-only process. And so in this case, you are eliminating the use of mercury entirely. So mercury eliminated is defined as the change in the amount of mercury lost to the environment as a result of introducing mercury-free gold production processes to replace existing mercury-based processes. And here the calculation is just the mercury eliminated is equal to the amount of mercury that was used. That is the mercury to gold ratio that was previously existed times the amount of gold that was previously produced. And then afterwards, after the intervention, the amount of mercury used is 0. So the mercury eliminated is simply the amount that was used previously. Okay, next slide, please. So an example would be, again, if you install a completely new mercury-free process that replaces existing mercury-based processes. So in these pictures, of course, you probably recognize there's a shaking table on the left picture, and there's a gold cube on the right picture, which are gravity-based processes that don't use mercury. Okay, so now there's a third category, and this is probably the most complicated. We have a category called mercury prevented. This is defined as the change in the amount of mercury loss assumed to be prevented by the introduction or ongoing support of mercury-free methods. And how do you calculate mercury prevented? Well, you calculate it as the typical mercury to gold ratio that's assumed to be prevalent in the area times the amount of gold produced by the new method. All right, That's a little bit complicated, but let me explain some more. So if you go to the next slide, please. Why do we use such a complicated idea? Well, this was invented because many of the countries where planetGOLD works, mercury use is illegal. And those projects are not allowed to work officially and directly with anyone who's currently using mercury, which makes it very tough. It's very difficult for those countries. So in those cases, what those projects do is instead they introduce new mercury-free capacity. So they build a new gravity-only plant, or they build a new cyanide plant, and that plant is then used by miners in the area. Now, we don't know for sure if those miners used to use mercury and now are bringing their ore to the new plant. That's possible. That's what we hope. It could be that those miners still use some mercury, but then process some of their ore in the new mercury-free plant. We don't know. We just can't say exactly what's going on because we can't look at the illegal activities. So instead, what are we saying? What we're saying is the new mercury-free capacity produces a certain amount of gold. So say you build a new plant, it produces a kilogram of gold every month, and it's mercury-free. So what we're saying is we know that this plant produces a kilogram of gold. We know if people in this area had used mercury to produce that, they would have used the old mercury to gold ratio times 1 kilogram of gold. And therefore, we are preventing the use of mercury to produce that 1 kilo of gold. So that is the concept behind mercury prevented. We're just looking at how much gold is produced in a mercury-free way, and we're assuming that that amount of mercury is being prevented, the amount that would have been used to produce that gold. It's a little bit complicated, but I think you understand why we had to make this this category for those countries where mercury use is illegal and they can't directly observe the reduction of mercury. There's another circumstance. Again, this is where generally where mercury is, no, don't go to the next slide yet, please. There's another circumstances where projects are intervening with sites that are already mercury free. But what they are afraid of is that those mercury-free sites might backslide and use mercury again. And by the way, this happens all the time. There's been a whole history of interventions with ASM sites where they have tried to create mercury-free sites, but something breaks or they can't get the machine repaired or there's some reason, and then the miners go back to using mercury. So some projects have also intervened with mercury-free sites, to help them to maintain those mercury-free sites. And in those cases, they're preventing the backsliding into mercury use. So that's another way that mercury prevention can be considered. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's an example of this situation. So in Ecuador, mercury use is illegal. Nonetheless, it's still quite prevalent. And in the top slide, you see that miners take their ore and do their own processing with mercury and get a relatively low percentage recovery. What the Ecuador project did is they assisted some mercury-free processing plants that already existed to expand their capacity. They attracted more miners, small-scale miners, to come to those mercury-free plants. And so the extra amount of ore coming to those mercury-free plants, we consider the gold produced there to have prevented mercury use. So that's an example of preventing mercury use. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the very last category, which is mercury avoided. So imagine you're a planetGOLD project and you've been working for 5 years to build mercury-free capacity. You building a gravity-only plant, for example. It takes a long time. You have to get permissions, you have to get the land rights, you have to get all the permits and approvals. And finally, you are able to fully commission the plant completely by year 5 of your project. But then the project ends. But that plant that you have built with the efforts of the project will continue to operate for years after the project ends. So we want to give you credit for the fact that your efforts produced mercury-free capacity that will allow miners to produce gold mercury-free for many years to come. And so that mercury that you're preventing, or sorry, you're avoiding in the future, is considered, a outcome of your project, an impact of your project. So you certainly should be able to take credit for that. So this is a category we called mercury avoided in the future. And as you can see, here's a diagram where this amount is only really calculated at end of project, where you look at what capacity you've built and how much longer it's going to last after the project is finished. In this particular diagram, the plant built or fully commissioned in year 5 is assumed to last for 10 years after the project ends. And this is assumed to operate at the same capacity. So that's mercury avoided. Okay, I know a lot of that's complicated, but again, this is all documented and written out in the guidance document. You can contemplate it and go back and look at the guidance document for more information. There's one final piece of this. It's a little bit complicated, which is mercury abatement impacts. So all planetGOLD projects have a component where they intervene to provide direct technology transfer at intervention sites. So they're actually building new capacity or training miners at particular sites on how to operate their machinery in a given way. And that's a direct impact of mercury abatement. However, many projects also do technical education in a wider project area. So they may also, in addition to educating and training and working with miners at a given technology transfer site, they also do training for miners in the wider project area. For example, they may bring miners to the demonstration site and show them how the demonstration site works with the hope that those miners will take that information and apply it to their own operations back at their own locations. So both of those are interventions between the project directly to the miners. There's a third category, if we called social spillover, that's what we're calling it, in the surrounding areas. Not all projects will observe this, but in the first phase, some projects observed with data that miners in areas surrounding the project were getting information miner to miner, and they were learning about these new technologies without any intervention directly from the project, but they were just learning horizontally, miner to miner. So we're calling that social spillover, where you can observe that there's real changes in behavior that are happening through this horizontal spreading of knowledge. Okay, next slide, please. So the educational impacts may seem like a secondary issue, but in fact, planetGOLD's mercury targets are very ambitious, and they are based on the assumption of replication. So the educational impacts can actually be much greater and are, generally speaking, are much greater than the direct impacts at a given site. So it's really important to make sure you're accounting for those educational impacts. During phase 1, we had a lot of questions about how to actually consider those and calculate those. So I'm going to go through a few of those most common questions and give you some answers. So the first question, what kind of technical education is relevant? Is it any kind of education of miners or not? So the answer to that is you should only really consider educational activities that are related directly to the transition to mercury-free technology. So for example, if you're training miners about ASGM legislation, that's great. That's part of enabling the transition, but it's not directly related to training people on mercury-free technology. So you really should limit the consideration of educational impacts to the training on the technology. Second question, does the project have to work in those surrounding areas to consider social spillover? The answer is No. Social spillover means that the new technologies are adopted through informal minor-to-minor learning, imitation and replication across geographies without any direct project engagement. Now, again, not everyone's going to observe that, but some people have observed that. Next question. So how can you estimate mercury abatement if you're not working directly with a given operation or cooperative? So the answer is you have to collect data. So you need to go out and do a survey or collect data in some other way to estimate how many operations actually adopt lower mercury or mercury-free methods because of your education. So you have to actually go out and ask people or observe directly whether they have adopted new technology or changed their behavior in any way due to the education. And next, click through, please. So uptake of that, so this is called the uptake factor. And your uptake factor really assumes that those miners that you've trained have similar methods. They've taken up similar methods to those that you trained people on at the intervention site. If they don't have similar methods, you're going to have to adjust the uptake factor according to the differences between the methods. And then the second thing to keep in mind is that the units of analysis have to match. So if you are training miners and then miners change their operations, then you can count miners. If you are training a cooperative on a central processing system, for example, then you have to count the number of operations that have changed. So you just have to make sure that you're matching the units of analysis. Again, don't get too worried. All of this is described in the guidance document with sample calculations. So you should be able to think about this, contemplate it, and then read some more about it, and it'll become clearer as you think about it some more. Okay, next slide. I think I'm going to pause here for, I know that was a lot, but I'm going to pause for questions if there are any right now. And before we go on, I see that there's one in the chat, but it's in French, so I don't know if someone could maybe Asiatu, if you could interpret that for me.
Yes, got it. 1 second. So he's saying in what context are reduced, eliminated, and prevented mercury applicable?
Well, it will depend on the operations that you're looking at. So in Burkina, I believe that they did, in fact, do elimination and prevention, is my recollection of Burkina's intervention. So those would be the calculations that would apply, as well as avoidance, because they have a new plant in place. And so that plant will continue to operate for a number of years. Okay, if there are no other questions right now, I'm going to turn it over to Gosha to continue with the next indicator.
Thank you very much, Susan. And we're going to switch now to core indicator 2, formalization. It's a little bit more straightforward, the element here. So we're also going to speed up a little bit. So when it comes to formalization, the next slide, the way we want to measure our impact in this area, we have two types. So first of all, we look again similarly with the first indicator into direct technical intervention and assistance. And in this area of formalization, we are going to look first of all on the number. We try to estimate and count the number of all miners that are receiving assistance that led to the formalization of their operation. We are also would like to, there will be a space for you to provide also how many of these miners were women. So we have indication also gender disaggregated estimates of our impact of our interventions. And you will be able to also report and what you are asked for to estimate. In addition, to have it both level. One is number of all miners and the number of all mining operations that were supported through this direct technical assistance. And if we talk about the direct support and assistance, this might include really, you know, the work that you do directly with mining organization, miners, cooperatives that you work with under the planetGOLD program at the sites. That could include direct mentoring and coaching of miners, or a legal support provided to the mining operation that led to the formalization of their operation. So this is one part, really direct technical assistance. The other side, the next slide, please. We look also into the educational activities. There will be many of those activities happening under your projects. This includes, for example, awareness raising initiative, trainings, creation of system or tools meant to benefit miners that wish to be formalized. That can be, for example, creation of a tool or registry by government that really assists miner to formalize. So this would be educational activity. And here you also will need to try to estimate the total number of miners that have, for example, participated in such training or awareness raising activities. And again, we would like to understand, you know, what percentage of this miner were women. And the same as in the direct assistant, we will look into the total number of miners, but as well trying to report total number of mining operations that have participated in training and awareness raising activity regarding the formalization. So we just wanted to, you know, to introduce those different categories and indicators that you can already start, you know, getting familiar with as you are starting your projects or you are advancing in your project execution, to pay attention to these indicators, which you are required to report on the yearly basis. I think this one actually, you know, was pretty straightforward. I think this is already end of this category. I don't know if anybody had any specific question about indicators that we discuss under formalization. You're also welcome to take a floor if you would like, or use the chat, of course. I think there was a discussion, right? I see, but you're responding already in the chat, Susan. I think, you know, we were going to go to another indicators. If you have perhaps questions, probably we can take it after the additional 2 indicator sets, since they are a little bit quicker to go through. Maybe Susan, I think you will lead us again through this one, right? Yes.
Yes. So the third category is responsible gold produced or sold. So next slide, please. What do we mean by responsible gold? We mean that the gold is produced in accordance with the planetGOLD criteria. And we discussed planetGOLD criteria during the orientation session, if you attended that. And in addition, I want to highlight that there will be a separate training on the planetGOLD criteria in May that all of you are welcome to attend. And we also have a great number of resources on the planetGOLD criteria on Homebase. So again, you have a lot of information that you can access to understand the planetGOLD criteria. But as a review, what are they? They govern the operations of entities that are engaged with our program, and they require those operations to avoid, minimize, mitigate, and offset any adverse impacts to people and the environment. And by doing this, by operating in a responsible way, those operations will be more likely to attract financing and get access to formal markets. For those of you who have heard of the craft code, planetGOLD criteria are a form of the craft code. They are a branch of the craft code, but we've added a few other criteria to be compliant with Minamata and the JEF. So next slide, please. So for just a quick review of craft, but again, there's lots of resources on craft elsewhere. There are a number of modules in craft, and some of them the operations are required to be in compliance with. Others allow continuous improvement. The first module or two modules, modules 1 and 2, require that the operation shows that it's legitimate and that it has a management system in place. Next slide, please. Module 3 is the most important. It is the module that shows that where operations can prove that they are not engaged in what are considered, worst practices. That is, they don't have forced child labor, they aren't engaged in any torture or cruel or inhumane degrading treatment of workers, and they don't engage in human rights violations and abuses. So that would require automatic disengagement if there was evidence of any of those things. Module 4 is where entities can show that they are not working with illegal actors, that they aren't working with people who are engaged in human rights abuses, and they have evidence that they're making all their payments appropriately. So module 4 is where there can be opportunity for continuous improvement. So again, this is the craft code. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with it. If not, again, there will be a whole entire training on this so you can get all the details on this later. Next slide, please. We did add 3 criteria to the craft code that are specific to planetGOLD. One is, of course, eliminating mercury in the mining process. We also have more clear requirements for respecting and protecting the rights of indigenous communities. And we also have more clear requirements on minimizing the impact on biodiversity. Next slide, please. So the indicator that we're asking you to provide to us is the amount of responsible gold. So again, you're in compliance with the planetGOLD criteria from operations that are participating in your program. So what does compliance mean? It means that they have to have none of those module 3 human rights risks, those terrible things, and they have a mitigation plan for any of the other module 4 risks. And also they have to be mercury free. So that's what responsible means. And then the guidance on all of this is available online. Again, there's the link, it's on home base. There's information, reporting forms, etc. are all there. And there'll be the upcoming training in May. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's amount of responsible gold produced. We have a separate indicator for how much of that is sold into formal markets. So what are we looking for here? Some planetGOLD projects have specific activities related to creating formal supply chains between the mine and the market. And what we're asking is, how much gold are you selling via those supply chains that you're developing? And so that the idea is to really encourage downstream buyers to create conditions that would encourage small scale miners to produce responsible gold so that they can sell it at an advantage into the market. So that's why we're tracing the amount of responsible gold sold into formal supply chains. Next slide. So that's it for that conditions. Okay, last indicator, access to finance. Gosha?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Okay, so last indicator, please, next slide. Here we have also 2 key indicators with the sub fields to be provided. So first one is an amount of money made available through the new mechanism. I think we need to click. Yeah, thank you. So there is indicators that we're looking at, which is a number of the new financial products and mechanisms developed or supported. And we'll then look also into to report amount of money available for miners or operations via this new mechanism. So you record amount of money made available. And through this, as a next step, we also have to understand how much of this money that was generated through this new mechanism was accessed by the miners and or ASGM operation. So that's a third one. Next click, please. And also would like to understand from the other side is how many miners and as well, again, mining operation are receiving the finance through this new mechanism. So this is another way of looking as well into that. And you will be also asked to provide information looking into also how many out of the miners that access this the money that was generated through the new mechanism, how many of them were women, how many of them were also indigenous people, and you also would be good to to note what was the use of the money. For example, was it generated for the formalization effort or mercury-free equipment or other the elements that really support the transformation of the sector and of the operation and cooperative. Okay, so this is on one side. Again, we're talking about direct assistance and support, so amount available of money made available for new mechanism. The next slide. On the other side, we look also on the amount of money that was generated, made available through existing mechanism, but that were able to be accessed because of educational activities. So here as well, we will look into the amount of money that was accessed by the miners and ASGM operation because of the trainings and the money, as I mentioned, from the existing financial mechanism that there might be available at the local, regional, or national level. You will be asked also to provide again estimate of number of miners and ASGM operation that are receiving such finance through these educational activities. And if possible as well, provide information on average amount of finance received per miner or ASGM operation. And again, as in previous indicator, the data, if available, on how many of these miners were women or indigenous people, this is also one of our indicators to be provided if possible. I think this is the end of our indicators, right? Just the next. Yes. And I think here we can stop for a second for question. Any question maybe for the 3 indicators that we had?
Yeah. Hopefully those are more clear than Mercury. Mercury is difficult. The others are more straightforward. Really just amounts. Oh, there's a hand. Concobo. I'm not sure who that is. Sorry. Please go ahead and come off mute and speak.
Merci.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like just to give you the context of my country. In my country, we have several sites, and we have interventions on one site. One site in the middle of the country. And yes, mercury is banned nationwide in Burkina Faso. And thanks to this, we implemented one process associated to these mercury-free activities on one side. And if this side we have actors using mercury in that context, how do you understand the calculation, the real calculations?
So yeah, this comes back to the issue of the prevented. It's very complicated because we don't know, right? You can't directly understand if people are engaging in this illegal activity. You can't, they might hide from you, or they're not going to be so open about their mercury use. So our assumptions are really based on looking at the new capacity that you have provided through the planetGOLD activities and the training. I know that Burkina Faso has provided a lot of training to miners to demonstrate mercury-free technology. So the idea is then to look at the site where you have intervened, the one site, and calculate how much mercury has been reduced there by introducing mercury-free technology. That's easy because you can look at the amount of gold produced and then estimate how much you've prevented mercury being used there, since you're now producing mercury-free. In terms of then estimating how much you've prevented in other places, you would need to do a survey of the miners who have been trained and ask them either through a survey or going to visit their site or in some other fashion to then see what percentage of them. You don't have to visit everyone you've trained, but some sample to see how many of them have actually adopted mercury-free technology. And then based on that, look at their mercury-free production, and you can calculate how much mercury you've prevented by training people on mercury-free technology. So that's the chain. You look at your intervention site, but then you also look at the people you've trained and estimate how many of them have changed their behavior due to your training. And that's where the prevention calculations come in. I hope that's a little bit clearer. And we are happy to even discuss. I want to say one thing, in addition to all these guidance documents and other materials, we are also happy when you're ready to do annual reporting to actually schedule a call with any planetGOLD project to go through your calculations with you and to join hands in helping you to do them if there's something that isn't clear. Oh, we're always happy to provide that kind of technical assistance. So nothing to worry about. We're just trying to help you understand the ideas, and then we can always work together to address the particulars of your specific country situation. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, but I think we have enough time for the quiz. There's a quiz. Sorry, guys, there's a quiz. I hope you were listening. So we have a Menti code. Konkoba, I can see your hand up, but we're going to go ahead in the interest of time. If you have a question, if you could type it into the chat, that would be great. So if you can go to the menti.com and enter this code 95855273. I'll give everyone a quick chance to get there. And then we're going to have a little quick quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next slide, but the Menti address and code is in the chat if anyone didn't have enough time. Okay, so the first question is on mercury abatement. Okay, so there's a planetGOLD country project that, in addition to its direct interventions, they are also engaging in technology demonstrations, trainings, and other educational activities. And because of those educational activities, 2 local groups were very inspired by that training. So they went back to their own areas and set up 2 new mercury-free plants in other parts of the region. And as a result, 10 kilos of gold are produced by each plant, mercury-free, without the use of mercury. Every year they produce 10 kilos of mercury-free gold at each plant. So that's very different than other people in their area, because typically the operations in that area use whole ore amalgamation. And an operation in that region using whole ore amalgamation produces 10 kilos of gold using 50 kilograms of mercury. That is, they have a 5-to-1 mercury to gold ratio. So they consume 50 kilos of mercury. Typically, a mercury plant consume that much. Okay, so the question is, the quiz is, next slide, please. How would you report the mercury abatement? Okay, let's click quickly through those. Is it 50 kilos of mercury reduced, 100 kilos prevented, 100 kilos eliminated, or 50 kilos avoided? So you can go ahead and answer in the Menti. A, B, C, or D. I'm going to give a few seconds for everyone to answer. Okay. And the answer is B, 100 kilos of mercury prevented. And why? Why is that? Because there were 2 plants, and each plant prevented 50 kilos of mercury use. And it's prevented because these are new plants and thus completely new capacity. And it's not replacing technology at an existing plant. So that's the answer. 100 kilos of mercury prevented. Okay, that's the first question. Next question. Gosha, I think this one's for you.
Yes. So thanks a lot. So we're looking again to formalization. And the question is, which of the below is not a type of educational assistance provided to the minors related to the formalization? The A is awareness raising initiative, B, trainings, C, direct legal support to mining operations, D, creation of an online government registration system for use by miners to facilitate the formalization process. Oh, sorry. Okay. So you think you should be seeing now these questions in the Menti if you want to answer. It's there. Yes, please. Just a few seconds. Okay, I think we can probably, everyone has voted. I just got the information. Perfect. So we can see also the result here. And one more click, please. So we see that, of course, the direct legal support to mining operation is not a type of educational assistance. That would be a direct assistance provided to the mining operation. So that would be to report it in the indicator, in the second indicator under the formalization category. Okay. Yeah.
Next question is on responsible gold, the third indicator. So it's estimated that 2 tons of gold are produced per year by operations assisted by a certain planetGOLD country project. So all of that gold is produced without the use of mercury, but only 75% of it comes from plants that conform with the planetGOLD criteria. So 2 tons of gold across all of the operations assisted by this country, but only 75% of the plants conform with the planetGOLD criteria. Okay, so the question is, how would you report the amount of responsible gold produced? 5 tons, 2 tons, none, or 1.5? So again, giving a few seconds for people to respond in the Menti. All right, and the answer is 1.5 because it's 75% of the 2 tons produced is produced responsibly according to our definition. Okay, last question. Gosha.
Okay, last question is about the access to finance. So what we have here, the scenario is a planetGOLD country project uncover existence of a special government-backed fund for women-owned small and medium-sized enterprises. The project delivered a series of business, financial trainings classes for women in the project intervention area, which showed the participants the kind of business record and information required to meet the fund's qualification requirements. The projects also help the miners to fill out the loan application. As a result, 100 miners in the project intervention area were able to access the loan. And the question that you see options to answer is, how would you report the access to finance outcome? 100 miners received finance through a new mechanism. B, 100 women received finance through educational activities. C, 100 women received finance through a new mechanism. And D, 200 women received finance through educational activity. We can also, in a few seconds more. Okay, and the correct answer was 100 women that received the finance for educational activity. As we have seen, this was a not new mechanism developed under the project. It was a training and support provided specifically to the women to access the existing funding opportunity. Okay, great.
Okay,
I
quiz
have
results.
a result, but I would need to probably share it so I can. Oh, we have a. Okay. Okay, we have MS. That was MS. I don't know who joined as a MS that had the higher score. So congratulations. Yeah. Okay, congratulations.
Ah, Zimbabwe comes out on top. Excellent. Do we maybe I take a minute to actually, do we have any results that we can show on the screen? Or will that take a second?
I would need to share it, right? My screen, I think. Okay. And
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll do that at the very
Yeah.
end. So let's just wrap up. So that's really the end of our, I know that there's another question in the chat, which I'll get to in a second, but just to wrap up here, this is our information on the indicators. We know that's a lot. Again, we have a lot of resources in the and on Homebase, a lot of training materials, guidance documents, and as I said, you're not alone. When you get to the point where you're ready to do these calculations, we're happy to always set up a call and walk you through it again personally in the context of your own particular country circumstances. So don't panic. We have lots of resources for you. What's coming up next in monthly trainings? Next slide, please, is we've already done the iGold training. Today's was indicators training. Next will be the planetGOLD criteria, as I mentioned, and you'll be receiving an invitation for that training, which will happen in early May pretty soon. And then later in the year, we will continue our deep dive webinar series on jurisdictional approaches that will begin in June. And then those of you who have communications managers, they should be contacting Jennifer, our communications manager at the Global Project, for one-on-one training. Okay, I think that's it for today. I appreciate your patience and your attention and your good questions. I would like to, sorry, Mona, we'll be able to have these questions still after Zoom ends? Yeah, so we can also answer the questions that have been posed that we haven't gotten to. We'll send them by email to the listserv. But thank you to the interpreters. As always, we rely on you for our ability to communicate with each other. So we really appreciate your work. And thanks to Gosha, and thanks everyone for your participation in today's call. And we'll see you next time, next month. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.